In this lecture, we're going to look at the psychological aspects that are involved in later adulthood. So let's take a look at all the changes and experiences that are common for this developmental age. Certainly we understand, just going back to our understanding of person and environment, it is our interaction with other systems that can impact us developmentally. And so we see this in some of the changes that are experienced in later adulthood. So for example, people will retire at this age. They may withdraw from careers that they've had their entire life, or have always been active in their places of employment. And retirement actually is a pretty large adjustment, which includes also sometimes a lower income because you're not getting that regular income, and you might be living off Medicare or then your retirement savings. Sometimes we hear in working with this age group, they'll say, well, this is for the first time that both we have been home during the day, and so it's spending more time with your spouse. There's adjustments to that, because if you've gotten into a routine or a pattern, and then with retirement you're home more, that does make a difference. Many people use their employment and their coworkers as their connections for socialization, and so these might be changes related to that as well. Or let's just say they've been on a bowling league and then physically decide that they can no longer do that. So there are changes in their socialization. Sometimes issues of having to move. Individuals might retire and move to a retirement community. That is leaving their established friendships and move into a different location, which can impact somebody pretty significantly. If an individual can no longer live at home by themselves and might have to live in a care facility or with a family member, these are pretty significant experiences. The key is hopefully maintaining and creating new interest, or maintaining their current interest, maybe getting involved and using the time during retirement to become more involved with civic responsibilities. But oftentimes what happens, unfortunately, is individuals at this age are more prone to illness, and so they are faced with many doctor's appointments, faced with the issues around the illness that they are that is impacting them, whether it's impacting their ability to walk or memory, or being able to have the energy to do the things that they used to do. So these are all things that need to be taken into consideration. So Erik Erikson's stages of development has identified that this stage is what he would call integrity versus despair. This is being able to either look back at your life in older adulthood and say, I've done a good job, I'm proud of what I've done, I've had a successful career, I wouldn't I'd change a few things, but wouldn't change everything because that's been my life journey. Or looking back and saying, I've not been able to accomplish this. I still have unresolved issues with my family. I need to apologize, and looking back in despair. So, he would say the crisis is that feeling that time is limited, and you don't have time to resolve these issues. I saw this in my end-of-life care work a lot at hospice, where individuals would say, I've done a family member wrong. I need to apologize. I want to reconnect. I want to be able to talk with them. And this is when they're facing a terminal illness, which is very, very difficult. I've also had patients that look back on their life and said, I have had a wonderful life. I have no complaints. And so that's, and being able to talk and share about their accomplishments. And so that would be our goal. Peck actually identified 3 key psychological adjustments into older adulthood. Self-differentiation is oftentimes, young and middle adulthood, we get focused on careers, or focused on our roles as maybe even a stay-at-home mom, and what we did, and the jobs that we had within our home, outside of our home. Self-differentiation is really, he identified, especially when we go to retire and our roles change, and figuring out that although one role is closing, we do have opportunities to open up new roles, so that we can fill in different things, or pursue different interests. Body transcendence is actually our ability to, despite, our physical changes of wrinkles and gray hair, maybe even thinning of hair, lack of energy, being able to adapt and understand our worth without letting those things get in the way. So still being able to see our role in society, being able to remain active and transcend those health concerns, is the second psychological adjustment that Peck identifies. The third is self-transcendence. And this is really understanding that, that in older adulthood, we don't have a full life ahead of us, that, what does death mean? And it really does also have us take a look at, what our belief systems are as far as life after death, and really kind of discussing that. But even more so, it has us to really understand our purpose, as far as now saying, well, my life's coming to an end, but how can I make someone else's better? Kind of leaving our legacy, and that's kind of the discussion that happens then. This might be when grandparents start giving things to their family members and saying, I want you to have this, or helping family members out with a gift of some kind. But I think in all my work in working with the elderly, one of the best interventions, which is very simple, is helping a client do life review. This really, I found, is imperative in helping somebody through despair, is understanding that we all make mistakes, but having them reflect on things that were beneficial and were helpful, and that they did good. Many times you might have, in working with clients, I might have clients that have been married for 50 years, or, and then I would start talking with them about how they met. And both of them start smiling and laughing again, and talking about how they met in their early 20s and what it was to be a young married couple. So life review not only allows them to reconnect at a level that they've not, maybe shared in several years, but also it brings back good emotional energy as well, because when somebody's able to kind of talk about good memories, I really do see a difference in the way their stress levels decrease, with the way they're able to relax more. And so I think life review, although a simple task, is something that's so important in working with this age group. And other issues like self-esteem and life satisfaction, certainly we are a society that values age and being young and looking young. And so when we have so many definitions about what beauty is, and it's really connected with youth, then self-esteem can certainly be impacted as far as the physical, view of it. Self-esteem also can be impacted when an elderly individual feels like they're not contributing, or that they're in their way, in their family's way. I don't know how many times I have been told by elderly clients that they don't want to be a burden. And so you could see that as well. Life satisfaction, one of the things that these chapters in your text talk about is what aging well would look like. And that really does kind of influence whether somebody can have a life satisfaction. Certainly it doesn't mean that somebody has to be absolutely healthy to have a full life. I had a client one time who was completely bedbound. She was actually a retired banker, took much pride in her work and in her career, but she was now physically unable to get out of bed because of a lung disease. But I've never met somebody with so much life satisfaction. She used that time to write letters, to make calls, to make crafts, and she was able to, she technically body transcend the physical limitations and create new interests that weren't impacted by that. So we also need to, as I've already stated, the impact of ageism in our society. We might retire from a career, but as an elderly person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't still seek employment, whether it's part-time or whether it's a different career. There's so many things that can still benefit from our experience and from the wisdom. And so we just want to make sure and look at the impact of ageism on an individual in this life stage as well. So in talking about theories of successful aging, one of them is activity theory, and simply put, it's keeping active both mentally, physically, and socially. They're saying that somebody who remains very active is more happier, has more life satisfaction, and actually has better health. This makes me think of my husband's 80-year-old aunt who lives in Spain. She does not look a bit over 65. She does yoga 3 times a week. She does cardio 2 times a week. She belongs to several clubs, including a tennis club. She goes out to dinner with friends, and she does a lot of activities with her family. Retirement did not slow her down. She remained very active and makes an effort daily to do something to keep her going, whether it's working out in her yard or in her garden. She understands that there's some things that she just shouldn't do any longer, so she asks for help. But certainly her successful aging has been clearly connected to her will and her goal to remain very active. So the second theory that is discussed is disengagement theory. This is when individuals start to gradually withdraw from the roles that they've been holding. And actually this is healthy because as we age, things change physically, emotionally, mentally, socially. And so we need to understand that there's times to transition to new goals or new areas, and understanding when our work is done in certain areas. I think the people that I've worked with that showed the most despair were individuals who could not let go and of roles that they've always tried to hold on to, and then those roles became overwhelming to them. And I think that was probably one of the things that I think was challenging, especially to people who are very career or success oriented. Community disengagement theory not only recognizes this need to naturally withdraw, but it also acknowledges the community or society's view of this. This is a fine line, and there's some discussion of ethical considerations that need to be taken into account here. Is one, should we let society define when somebody should not be considered for a role because of their age? That is ageism, and certainly the age should not be the only factor in that consideration. And so but we also know that the community sometimes in healthy ways, kind of comes around and supports elderly people because they understand that their physical needs and emotional needs are different. Certainly if you see somebody, an elderly lady, carrying a lot of bags as she's walking down the street, you may have somebody who's more willing to help because they understand that physically she could be supported. So there's a fine dance between this, and I think the key is that one, the individual should not withdraw from a role until they are ready. That healthy withdrawal of saying, you know what, I've done my job. It's time to let somebody else to take this on, and I'll be here to support them. Or I want to try something new. The community understanding the disengagement of being able to understand limitations, but not use that as a way of discrimination. And that's so important. So social reconstruction syndrome theory kind of falls into the concern of ageism, and it's where we look at the social breakdown of individuals based on the labels that are placed on them. So under this theory, it is not it's a theory that we need to be aware of to avoid for healthy aging, because we're saying that society has the younger population labels the older population in maybe an unhealthy way, and then the older population living within and interacting within that society begins to accept those labels and responds accordingly. And the response is actually generally negative, where they become more dependent, they don't pursue more things, they become more sedentary, they kind of give up. And so one of the things that we know with healthy aging is creating new interest is very important, and being able to maintain a healthy lifestyle and continuing to challenge ourselves are so important. And so social reconstruction syndrome is saying that we need to be aware of the labels that are placed on individuals and how they accept those labels. So we know that there are many life events that can have a significant psychological impact on individuals at this stage. Losing a spouse through a death, what does that mean to them financially, emotionally, and socially? Getting remarried again, and how does that impact the family? Any kind of family challenges, certainly elderly people that have families that live near or far, there's those family system dynamics that happen as well. Looking at grandparenthood or great-grandparenthood, and just grief and loss. The older population does not just grieve the loss of a spouse or the loss of friends at this age. They grieve loss of homes or loss of independence. They grieve in facing a illness. They grieve changes or when they have to move. So there's so many grief and loss issues that are so significant in this age of development.